Hi, everyone. Oh, that was louder than I anticipated. Hi, everyone. Great to see so many of you here. Lovely to see some familiar faces from the Freshers' Fairs and also some familiar faces from members who've been here over the last 2 or 3 years. So great to have you all back. Hope you had a great summer and you're looking forward to term tomorrow. I'm Charles. I'm the president for this term. But you don't really want to hear from me. I've got some messages, but I'll get them out at the end. You want to hear from the man we have here to speak this evening. Robby Mook is an American political campaign strategist and campaign manager. He was the campaign manager for Hillary Clinton's 2016 presidential campaign. He's currently a CNN political commentator and a fellow at the Harvard Belfer Center. His work focuses on defending digital democracy. So, without further ado, Robby.
A lot of people here. Hello.
Hi. Amazing.
Thank you.
No, thank you. Well, first of all, thank you so much for coming to Cambridge. How are you enjoying the other Cambridge? I know you're based up at Massachusetts a lot of the time.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you to Charles, who's doing an awesome job leading this whole operation up. And I want to thank everybody here for having me. This has been the warmest welcome. I don't speak a lot of things, but this has absolutely been the warmest welcome I've ever had. So it's an honor and a privilege to be here. And I don't know, I get nervous about making comparisons to Harvard. I'm worried I'll put my job at risk or something, but it's great here. So.
Well, I mean, since you mentioned Harvard, I thought that'd be a good place to kick off with your work at the Belfer Center. So obviously you're working on defending digital democracy, something which is really important at the moment. Midterms coming up. Are you fearful? Do you think we've cracked the code? There won't be any attacks on our digital democracy this time around, or are you a little bit more skeptical?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, first of all, one of the things I'm really proud of is after the 2016 election ended, I was really concerned, for reasons that are probably obvious, about cybersecurity for our campaigns, for our elections, but then also the threat of information operations from countries that are seeking to influence the election. And this problem obviously isn't a new one. It's been going on for some time, but I think what we learned in 2016 was how social media and just how dependent we are on the digital space for our work on campaigns and everywhere else, we're so much more vulnerable. And it's easy, it's a real strategic loophole for some of these adversaries where with very little money, I mean, when you look at what the Russians did, it was probably, per dollar or ruble or whatever, it was probably one of the most effective things they ever did, right? And what was distressing to me was from a campaign perspective, but also to some degree from the perspective of the people who run our elections in the US, there was literally no resource for them whatsoever. And I'm a member of a very exclusive club in the US called the Presidential Campaign Managers Club. And another member of that is Mitt Romney's campaign manager from 2012. And we saw each other at an event and we were talking. And I learned that his campaign had actually been hacked as well. It just didn't get very much publicity. So we decided to get together and form a bipartisan project to address this issue. We've been doing a lot of work with election administrators, helping them to do tabletop exercises, and we provided a lot of, basically a checklist for election administrators on all the different vulnerabilities they need to be attending to. We've been trying to do work on the campaign space most recently. To answer directly on your question, we're nowhere near where we need to be with campaigns. I mean, they are getting hacked. We've already seen that happen again. And actually, my colleague and I, Matt, are trying to work with the Federal Election Commission to see if we can essentially allow private cybersecurity firms to provide more direct assistance. It's complicated with the law right now to do that. So we're trying to address that directly. In as much as our elections are in the digital space and are vulnerable, I think the dialogue around this has been focused in the wrong direction a little bit. I think the fact of the matter is, as long as our elections are being run, are connected to the internet in any way, and they have to be, right? When you report results on election night, you can't put that on a chalkboard. You have to post that online. That's just a thing, and that is part of our election system. I'm a huge proponent of people registering to vote online. It's a lot easier than going somewhere physically. But all these things are vulnerable, and my belief is they're going to be hacked, period. So the discussion about like, will there be some hacking or no hacking isn't an option, it's gonna happen. The question from my standpoint is the system resilient enough to bounce back from that attack? So, and I know people laugh at this in the US that we're still not using paper ballots everywhere, and it is embarrassing, but we'll get that changed in the next few years is my hope. And the other thing we've been working with people on is how to communicate with the public to build trust before elections and then explain what's happened after elections. But there are a lot of things we can do between paper ballots and mathematical audits to assure people that the results are accurate, but then go back and make sure that we get accurate results if something's been done to mess them up in the process.
Is it a bit of a moving target? So do you think no matter how much resource you're devoting to this, if it is an academic project, albeit backed by big players in Washington, if you're going against the entire apparatus of somebody like Russia or against China, are you going to be able to fight on the same playing field? I don't know.
No, we never will, because in the U.S., elections are administered locally. So we have 50 states, but we actually have about 7,000 jurisdictions that run elections.
Yeah.
And there's just no way. They can't. And again, that's why I think we have to, and hopefully when the political gridlock loosens up a little bit in the US, we will be able to set minimum standards that, again, if something bad happens in the system, we can bounce back. When a vote is cast, it's recorded on paper, we have systems to audit the results so that people can just have that confidence that their vote's accurate.
You mentioned political gridlock. Are we going to have that gridlock loosened in November, or are we trapped?
No. Yeah, no. Well, here's what I would say. President Trump is going to face a choice. He's very likely to have a Democratic House. I don't like to be overly confident, but just by any objective measure, it's probably more likely than not at this point that Democrats gain control of the House. The Senate's a toss-up. I'm a little bit more pessimistic or conservative on that than some people, but the president's going to have to decide what to do. And if I were speaking with him about his reelection, which I will never do, I think there's advantage to him making a compromise on certain issues like infrastructure, prescription drug prices, other things. My guess is he will just use the Democratic House as a foil to make himself a hero, fighting against the Washington establishment, or however he wants to say it. Part of the problem for the president right now is his party's in charge of everything. He has no, he always needs someone to point to. So he's like still working with Hillary Clinton. He's like, but Hillary Clinton, and you're like, well, she's gone now. Like she's not. So now he'll have a foe to point to, and unfortunately, I think he'll use that very cynically.
Yeah. And if you are those Democrats, you hypothetically win the House. Trump is still there. He's railing against you. What do you do then?
Look, I think Democrats will, because we're going to elect a lot of great new members, and contrary to what you might read in the media, they're running ads in these campaigns about healthcare, job creation, infrastructure, the opioid epidemic in the United States. They're running on kitchen table issues. So if I'm a Democratic member, I'm going to pressure my leadership, hey, let's get some things done. I said I was going to go to Washington and break through partisanship and get some things done. So I think they should make a good faith effort to pass an infrastructure bill. I just assume that Donald Trump's going to come and say, fine, do that, but we're going to build my wall, and that's just a non-starter. Yeah, I would try to get a prescription, some sort of relief for prescription drug prices, but I think the president's going to be too beholden to special interests there. So I think there will be a good faith effort, but I think it'll be hard. Then there's the question of oversight. And I think the challenge for Democrats is to do that responsibly. It is really important. But we we can't do it irresponsibly. We can't. I've said publicly a number of times I don't think we should give Donald Trump the benefit of an impeachment vote on day one. We should get the evidence out there for the American people on how he's been fleecing the country and enriching himself, and then let's take it one step at a time, and obviously give Mueller time to do his work.
Perfect. And just picking up on pessimism in terms of the Senate, are there any races we should look out for? So when we're here, there's the Union Social on November the 6th. We're going to be watching the midterms. What events and what states should we be looking out for on that Tuesday?
Well, I ran the Democratic House Campaign Committee, and the political map is all about environment and opportunity. So we have a great environment right now for Democrats. The Senate map is not the greatest in terms of opportunity. We're doing a lot of defense in some pretty red states. So look, there are five states that are going to be tough. Four in particular: West Virginia, North Dakota, Indiana, Missouri. Florida, is a tough race for us, but I think we have a fantastic nominee for governor there, who I think is really going to help up and down the ticket. But it'll be interesting to see what happens in those four states. Our candidates have been leading in the polls, but I think the president does in fact have time to galvanize his base and try to pull some of those people who normally vote Republican and voted for him, back. But unless he can be more disciplined about his message, certainly the momentum's on our side right now. There's really interesting race in Tennessee where former governor, who's a Democrat, did amazing things to build the economy there. Made Nashville into very much what it is today, an amazing city. He's in some sense the favorite to win there today, and he's running against an absolutely, a bad candidate. Let's just put it that way. I want to be careful on my word choice. Marsha Blackburn is not. We do not see eye to eye on a lot of things. And then we have great pickup opportunities in Arizona and Nevada. Texas is one. We were just talking about Texas. The fact that I'm sitting on a stage talking about the fact that Texas is in play for Democrats is just incredible. And Beto O'Rourke is so talented, and even if he doesn't become a U.S. Senator, he's going to go on and do amazing things. So all of those are honestly really interesting to look at. Yeah,
and just sort of moving away from the present and sort of reaching back into the past, and thinking a little bit about your career itself. So you mentioned Indiana as one of those toss-up races. I know in 2008 you were involved in running campaign operations there in Ohio and Nevada as well. So how was 2008, and I suppose before that, how did you first get involved in this sort of political world as a strategist? Yeah.
Well, I definitely thought I was a really good strategist when I was like 13. I think is when I first started volunteering, and I'm sure everybody really appreciated my input at that age.
What were you doing? Were you just...
Well, it's interesting. So where I grew up in Vermont, which is up in New England in the Northeast. Pretty small towns. There's no municipal garbage removal. So sorry, I keep like ignoring you guys over here. I'll try to move over a little bit. There's no municipal garbage removal, and so everybody has to go to the town dump every week, and you literally just bring your trash and drop it off. And when I was little, there was literally just this pit in the ground. You just throw your stuff in the pit, and they got better than that. They started sending it to New Jersey, literally everybody in the town had to go to this one place on Saturday morning / afternoon. And so if you wanted to do political work or campaign, getting petition signatures or campaigning for a candidate, this was, after all my years in politics now, like working on campaigns, supposedly really sophisticated, this was literally the most targeted and efficient use of time that I've ever seen in my entire career, because everybody there's a resident, they're almost all registered voters, everybody has to show up unless you want to like collect your garbage for a long time. So that's where I got started, honestly, was just like running up to people with their trash on their hands, like, hey, could you sign this petition? and honestly, I just, and people ask me sometimes, how do you get started in politics? I just went out and started like helping out on campaigns. It was literally, and I just got picked up from one thing to the next. I worked for Hillary Clinton in 2008 in the Nevada caucus, which was pretty intense. Caucus rules are a lot different than the primaries that the states run. And they had in the caucus rules in 2008 that they had special caucus precincts in the casinos. So a big part of our work was like working in these casinos and getting to know the employees there and building relationships with them and organizing them. So that was different. And then, as you said, I went on to Indiana, Ohio, spent some time in Puerto Rico. That was an amazing campaign because we had so many good candidates for president that year. We pulled out some wins for Hillary, and she obviously went all the way through, but we came up short.
Yeah, but pretty diverse places though, going from Nevada to Ohio and Indiana.
Yeah. The primary in Indiana was very different than the Strip in Las Vegas. Okay.
Yeah. And I suppose we've sort of sketched what you've done, but what's it sort of like being on campaign? I bet you've got some interesting stories, both 2008 and 2012, 2016. You must have seen some interesting.
Yeah.
I know it's a broad question.
Yeah, no. Look, probably the most interesting thing that happened in 2008 was we were in Indiana, and we knew it was going to be close, but the results started coming in. It was getting kind of late at night, and it was really close. And this was also pretty late in the primary, so the press was kind of predisposed to be like, it's over for Hillary, she's done, she can't even, she was supposed to win Indiana, she can't win it. And there was a real question, what do we do? Because the news cycle is, this was back in 2008, which feels like the Stone Ages at this point in terms of the news cycle. But, cable news was like, what's the result? What's the result? And there was a point in the evening you would get to where you needed to like either declare victory or it was just going to be messy the next morning. Like, you'd never be able to declare victory, basically. And I remember we had these guys set up in the basement who were monitoring the data, and I had a guy named Aaron who had been spot on. He'd been spot on in the Vegas casino caucuses and spot on on everything else thus far. And so I remember going to him and saying, come on, like, what's going to happen? He's like, I think you're going to win. I think. Like, I'm pretty sure. And so I went upstairs, and I remember there was Terry McAuliffe, I eventually went on to run his governor's campaign, who was chair of the campaign, Hillary and Bill, and Huma was there. And and I'm like 20, I must have been like 28 at the time or something. And I remember them all just standing there staring at me. It was like, so what are we going to do? And Hillary's like, she is amazing. This is why she'd be an amazing president. She is just so, she's such a good listener, and she's so calm. And I remember her just saying, so what should we do now? And I just like, my heart's like boom, 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 boom. And I'm like, I don't know. And I knew she had to go out there and say something. And and I just said, you got to go declare victory. Like, just go do it. And I remember thinking, like, I'm either going to be right or I am so screwed after this. Like, it's all, And we won, thank God. But it was like 3 a.m. or something. And that was a good night. And actually, this is totally random. But another good story was that night. I think this was that night. This was either that night or the night after. So when you go to these primary contests, you're there for like 4 to 6 weeks. It's really short and it's really intense. And you pile in all these staff, and it's like you're just running by the seat of your pants every day. And people need to live somewhere, and so they live with our supporters. And so in Indiana, unbeknownst to me, in Indianapolis, there was this like thriving gay community. And this one guy, I can't remember his name, but he was in the office every day. I got this one staffer, and he like took him in, and then we started getting all these other people. And literally the entire like gay male community in Indianapolis just took in like all of our staffs, and it was like my 2 dads like the whole time. And so I turned to this guy. He was helping us out in the office, like I said. And this was a few days before primary night. And I just said to him, I was like, you know, we need to have a party for these staff. They've worked so hard. I don't know if we're going to win or lose, but this is like the last thing I should be spending my time on. So can you put together like a little party for us? And he's like, I got it. Don't worry about it. So I was like, okay. So he sends the information on where to go for this party, and we all sort of drive up, and it's this bar, and it's like a little bit empty, but there's like a stage like this up there, and we're like, oh, okay. We open the door, we go in, we start ordering some drinks at the bar, and we're like, he said he was gonna like do something for us, and then literally all of a sudden, these lights come on the stage, music comes on, and it is a Hillary Clinton drag show. And I was like literally the most amazing thing I've ever been part of in my entire life. And like, unfortunately, we didn't have iPhones then. So it was like, I was trying to, you know, the little flip phones, you could like take the pictures. And I was like trying to take pictures of it and like texting them to Hillary and everything. And I was like, you should see this. It's so fucking amazing. So anyway, that was one of the greatest nights in my political life.
Did you tell Hillary about...
Oh my God, yeah. I was like trying to text her the picture. Yes. And they were amazing. They did like, you know, like Dolly Parton's 9 to 5 and like the pantsuit and like the whole, like she works hard for the money. It was amazing. It was great. Never forget that. Yeah.
So
that's not what you wanted to.
Where do I go from Hillary Clinton drag show? Well, I suppose jump before we get onto questions from the floor, but jump forward to 2016.
Yes.
So 8 years later. So you worked on that campaign. What was different in 2008? But what was different in 2016?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, look, the dynamics of it were completely different in so many ways. But coming into the primary, she was such a big presence, right? But we knew that there was going to be the anti-Hillary. I remember, like, in meetings, I mean, this was like, I didn't know who it was going to be, but it was like, somebody's going to be the anti-Hillary. And so it's so funny to think about in retrospect. We put a ton of resources into the primary. You know, we had like 100 staff in Iowa on day one. And some people were like, this is crazy. Why are we spending all this money on this? But, you know, we knew it was going to be tough. And I think the other thing that was really hard about getting that campaign off the ground was like the scrutiny was just insane. I mean, it was like, you know, you'd be seen in the street somewhere in New York, and there'd be, and obviously, and actually the media had changed too. So it was like, it was the content driven, right? In 2008, it was like a reporter would write an article. In 2016, it was like pump out the content. So there was just this ridiculous amount of focus on process and getting ready. So that just made it hard because it was like, you were you almost like operated scared on day one, you know? And I think on the best campaigns, you're just like, you're on a mission, you're out there, and you're just, you know, you're just giving it your best every day. And I felt like we were sometimes having to like walk into it with shields, you know, because of all the scrutiny. And then look, I mean, there was nothing that could have prepared us for, you know, for Donald Trump. I mean, it was just, and I was just thinking the other day, you know, when you're running a campaign, there's a pretty, back in the day, like 3 years ago, there was a pretty typical process you'd follow to research your opponent and sort of figure out how to make the case, right? What was the rationale? And I remember sitting in our headquarters in December, and our people just were totally overwhelmed. I mean, it was impossible to piece together Donald Trump's corporate existence. Like, it was so vast, and the tree was so wide. I mean, I didn't even understand a lot of these legal structures, you know what I mean? And it took literally dozens of people to just collect lawsuits that he'd been involved in from like 10 cities. I mean, it was insane.
Yeah. And,
you know, in retrospect, that was a signal of like, it's always going to be too much. Like, there's so many bad things you can't. It's hard to draw attention. You know, and we kind of, you know, we threw so much spaghetti at the wall. You know, Hillary went and did a whole bunch of stuff around Atlantic City and all the horrible things he'd done there, cheating people out of their wages, threatening and intimidating his workers, and it just, like, it would be in one day and out the next, like it just didn't matter. And I wrote an op-ed about this in the New York Times the other day. I remember at the convention, which was supposed to be our best, that is your best day on a campaign, on a presidential. Hillary gives her speech, and it was all about, people's economic lives and our economic future. She leaves with Tim Kaine. They go on a bus tour of Western Pennsylvania and Eastern Ohio to talk about manufacturing and job creation. And all we were talking about was Donald Trump's attacks on Khizr Khan. And in fact, we had a woman speak at the convention that we thought would be our star player, who was a woman whose husband had died in Iraq. She used the death benefit she got from him to pay her tuition at Trump University. And she pays them the money, and they literally just never call her back. She was just cheated. And it's this woman whose husband dies and serving our country overseas. It just, again, fluttered out. And so, as we move forward, we're going to have to think about this again. We're going to have to think really hard, because in a traditional sense, and for me as a campaign manager, when Donald Trump was getting all this negative attention in the news media about saying the most horrible things about this family who'd lost their son, again, in service of our country, I thought he was losing. Right? Because when you say those horrible things, you lose. The voters will punish you. And in retrospect, I wonder now if in fact what was happening there was Hillary was never able to make her case. And there were a lot of factors in that, but we let him, there's always a saying, if your opponent's hanging himself, let him hang himself. And we let him hang himself. So, lots to unpack there, but that's a little bit. Yeah.
See,
bit of 2016 for you.
Almost as if you were playing a game which you had sort of played through your entire political career, and then the rules suddenly changed.
Yeah, it was like the rules changed, the court changed. Like, you used to throw the ball in the basket, and you were supposed to hit it with a bat. I mean, it was like, it was like crazy. Yeah.
And in terms of comparing that to the primary campaign, so you said that you grew up in Vermont. When you saw Bernie coming up to run against her, was that more of a sort of conventional operation, sort of maneuvering against
in the
Bernie?
primary?
In the primary, but he again represented quite an interesting new challenge.
Oh, 100%. And it used to drive Bernie supporters crazy, because I'd voted for Bernie 3 times, and I'd come in the room. This was particularly, after the primary, I personally put in a lot of work to try to get us, bring us together and all. I'd go in the room, I'd be like, I voted for Bernie Sanders 3 times, and they'd be like, no, it can't be true. Look, Bernie, I was really worried about Bernie early on, because I'd seen him win in Vermont, and he was totally underestimated there when he won his House seat. And he was totally underestimated when he became mayor of Burlington. And when he raised $15 million in that first quarter that he got in, that's when I knew, like, that this is going to be the anti-Hillary. It was, I think the challenging thing about the primary, and I don't know what the right move was, what the right decision was it just went on a really long time. And the fact was, once we got through Super Tuesday, mathematically, we'd built a lead that was essentially impossible for him to overcome. And that was a lesson I learned out of the 2008 primary, when Obama had done the exact same thing to Hillary. He just pulled ahead, and the way the math works in a Democratic primary, it's like once you get a certain number of delegates in these contests, it's just it's easy to get ahead early, and it's almost impossible to catch up later. But Hillary had run all the way, and we thought it was important to just let the primary happen. And so what we got into was this. It was fascinating, actually. We basically called all these contests. You could just go through the contests and be like, we're going to win this one, we're going to lose that one, we're going to win this one. And it came down to whether it was a caucus or primary, whether that primary had open or closed. system, other demographic information, and in some ways, I think it was just hard because we knew, particularly by March, April, she was going to be the nominee, but we didn't want to look disrespectful of the primary process, so we had to wait. And like even I was talking about trying to figure out Trump, we had to do all that in secret because we couldn't. So, but look, I think the campaign with Bernie made Hillary a better candidate. She had to do a lot of debates early on, and it certainly exercised our organizing muscles. We only won 2 caucuses, and those were the first 2 where we had people there for a year and put in a ton of resources. So I think we really trained our people up really early.
Yeah, and I promise the final thing from me. With Sanders and also with the rise of Ocasio-Cortez in the Democrat Party at the moment, 2020, who would you like to see on the ticket? And that isn't necessarily the same thing as who you think would do best and take on Trump in the best possible way, thinking strategically. I suppose. Yeah,
I mean, I think the really good news is we're going to have a really big primary. So we're going to have a lot of choice. And sometimes the primary is a great thing because it just tests people, right? Some candidates are really awesome on paper and feel and sound really great, and then they get into the primary and they don't really get anywhere, right? So that's the choice is a really good thing. I don't think Democratic voters in the US walk around saying, I'm from this wing of the Democratic Party, or I'm a Bernie person versus a Hillary person. In any state where we would poll during the primary, Hillary and Bernie would both have 80 to 90% approval ratings. So Democrats liked both of them, right? So and when you have 20 people running, I think you're going to have a lot of different people all over the ideological spectrum. But the most important thing to me is the messenger, right? You could argue Hillary Clinton was empirically left of Barack Obama in 2008 on a number of issues, but Barack Obama is an incredible messenger. You know what I mean? And so, and I also think the Democratic Party is ideologically aligned right now. We all support healthcare for everybody. We all support doing something extremely fast about climate change. We all support, major investment in infrastructure and making college affordable and lowering prescription drug prices. I mean, we agree, and we all agree Donald Trump needs to go, okay? So, I think what's more important is, do we have a candidate who can articulate a vision of who we are as a country, where we are today, and where we need to go? I mean, when you talk about someone like Beto O'Rourke isn't, on paper, he's not an ordinary guy. He's educated, very good places, but there's nothing on his resume that says amazing, inspiring Senate candidate in Texas. It's because he is gifted as a human at communicating, and he has a vision of who we are as a country and where we want to go that a lot of Texans are really excited about, right? So what I'm looking for are people who can do that. And what I worry is the press is going to make our primary into a bunch of litmus tests on issues, when I don't think that's really how the voters look at it. I think they're looking for a leader.
Perfect. And with that look to the future, I suppose it's best that I turn to the audience for some questions. So put your hand up and wait for a microphone to get to you once we've got the person in question. Can I go to the lady, the blonde? Yes, you, yeah, perfect. Can we get the microphone?
Is this for
yeah.
I'm not
so
stealing
I'm
somebody
gonna
else's water.
So I'm just going to move my chair. Cheers. Amazing. Yeah.
All right, can you hear me? Great. So my question's a little bit niche, but in 2016, some Republican groups used hacked documents in their ads, and more recently, the Congressional Leadership Fund, a Republican super PAC, obtained the full unredacted security form for a Democratic candidate in Virginia, as I'm sure you're aware, and posted it on their website, including a lot of her personal information, such as her social security number. So my question is, do you think that we've entered an era of bad faith campaigning, and what should we as Democrats do about that if it is the case?
Yeah, it's a great question. You know, on the second piece you brought up, I love that the Trump administration like won't respond to any FOIAs, and then when somebody sends a FOIA to the postal office, they just send out all this stuff, including somebody's PII. So I wonder if some of that was going on. We are not our best selves in our campaigns right now. And I'm obviously incredibly biased, but if you look back at the 2016 campaign, it's like, what did we really spend our time talking about? We didn't, we didn't spend time talking about people's lives. We spent time talking about these sort of, in our case, what I would argue were pseudo scandals. It was like nobody told us where Hillary was for 30 minutes, after the 9/11 event where she fainted, right? And that's coverage for a week. It's not like, well, what do we think about Obamacare? Is that the right way forward, right? And that's what we should spend our time talking about. I believe that the root cause of a lot of this, is money in politics. Because you can gain advantage, and obviously the super PAC, Citizens United really made this so much worse, that you can gain advantage in a campaign by pushing out through paid communication, particularly television, information about your opponent, and then they are unable to answer it. In fact, it's one of the reasons, I think we need not just disclosure of political advertising on platforms like Facebook, but there needs to be a way for campaigns to see what information is being trafficked on these platforms organically, because we can't respond to it if we don't know it exists. And that happened to my campaign. So, so I could say to you, we need to be kinder, gentler, and everything. It's not going to happen. But I think, and politics, as somebody here studies American political history way more than I ever have, so please weigh in. But from what I can tell, political campaigns have been really nasty, as long as our republic has existed. However, I think the money has amplified that problem and made us an uglier version of ourselves. So personally, I'm all about getting money out of politics.
Perfect. Good. Just the person in the second row there. Just wait for the microphone. Thank you.
Hi there. I have a question about how polling affects political strategy. So
Polling?
Polling, yeah. So obviously in the
I've heard of it.
So in the lead up to 2016, I guess the polling and subsequently the news almost had Hillary as a president-elect,
Yeah.
and sort of how that sort of affects your strategy on the campaign.
Such a good question. So I think you had a few things going on. One is it's just harder to poll than it used to be. And in 2012 in particular, which was the last presidential campaign, polling was pretty good. I was running the House campaign committee that year. I had House members and candidates for House come into my office and be like, "You're not spending money on my race. You're the worst person ever." And I'd say, all of the empirical data I have says you're going to be okay. So hang on. And we were right. It worked, and it certainly worked on the Obama campaign. In case you haven't noticed, our society is changing and technology and all that. So it's just harder to reach people now. And in particular, there were voters that everybody missed last time. I mean, I talked to my Republican colleagues. We all had the same information. So moving forward, I believe campaign managers need to not just be consumers of data, but they need to think strategically about how they interpret data. And like margin of error isn't just a number, it's almost like a strategic consideration, you know what I mean? And there's one other point I was gonna make on that, it's escaping me. But anyway, I think we need to be a lot more cautious moving forward. Oh, what I was gonna say is, I think another factor, there are a lot of things that are really particular, I believe, about 2016. And our numbers in the polling that we had really started moving after Comey did what he did. And so sometimes I think we were living in a October 15th world when things changed so much after that second debate. And so in our minds, we're like, oh, but she's up by so much. But actually going into Election Day, you know, Michigan was really tight. And what we had, we just thought that we could win it. And so I get a little nervous about, you know, just sort of condemning it on whole based on that. And then the last thing I'd say is, some of us were talking about this earlier. You know, my guys gave us like a 65% chance of winning, you know, and Nate Silver and those guys had the same thing. So it's funny, like some people go back and say, you had a third chance of losing. How dare you think you could win? And you're like, well, like actually it was 2-1, you know, but we fell into that third, right? I think it probably would have been a lot closer if people had factored in that late data and we'd been better able to reach certain voters, but yeah.
Perfect. Anyone on the balcony? Good. Actually, what I'm going to do is put us up there on the balcony. You can have the next question whilst Stuart gets around to you. I was forward thinking. And then just the person down there in front of me with the glasses. So.
Thank you. Hillary Clinton obviously was very gracious when she ceded the victory to Donald Trump. So I wonder, in an alternate history, in a parallel universe, if Clinton had won the presidency, what do you think the response would have been from Trump and the Republicans? And obviously 2 years in now, how do you think America and the world would be under a Clinton presidency?
What would, say the last part again?
Obviously, not only the immediate aftermath of the election, but we're 2 years on
like
now.
What
do you think Clinton's America would be like now?
That's an interesting question. Obviously, I can only speculate. What I do know is that Trump said during the election, effectively, it's all rigged. And so I imagine he would have said it's rigged. They stole it from me. And my understanding was he and Bannon were planning to start a media company. And so in effect, because they didn't expect to win. No matter what they tell you, they didn't expect to win. And they were basically building a constituency to launch a media organization. And I suppose it would have done well, you know, if Trump unfortunately has a lot of fans.
Perfect. And hopefully the microphone's made its way up to the balcony.
Yeah, it has. So I was wondering about what you said you want to see on the ticket for the next election. You said that it doesn't necessarily have to be somebody who's exceptional on resume, but rather somebody who's very, very good at communication and maybe as charismatic as Barack Obama was. So I was wondering, some people have criticized and said that Hillary Clinton must have been advised to be sort of the ice woman on that front and less enthusiastic, less personal, less emotional in some terms. So I was wondering whether you think that was and is still a gendered issue, and if you would give different advice to a woman candidate in the future, or if you think that it's just a fact that society will be different about it depending on whether it's a man or a woman.
It's a great question. Well, one thing I will make one definite prediction for you. One thing, and I'll be proud when it happens, knock on wood. I think instead of having the woman candidate in the Democratic primary this time, we're going to have the women candidates. And I think that's really important, actually. You see, I see in the Republican primary from 2016, a lot of things were said about Carly Fiorina, you know, that I think were really sexist. And there was a lot of discussion about how she appeared and that she was cold and calculating. I mean, it was just a lot of the same rhetoric. And I think having multiple women candidates, or let me put it a better way, having women finally represented half as much as they should be, you know, is going to be progress. But until half or more of our candidates are women in a primary, we're not there yet. And I think that Hillary broke new ground and hopefully has made it easier now. It's not going to be a novelty for a woman to run for president and to seek to be the nominee. It will be, a woman will have become a party nominee. Women face a set of challenges when they're running for office, at least I'll just speak for the United States, I can't speak for anyone else, that men don't. I ran a US Senate campaign in New Hampshire and I saw the same thing. Women are judged on their appearance in ways that men are not. Women are seen more skeptically. People question their motivations in a different way. It's more dangerous for a woman to appear ambitious, and when a woman seeks to a higher office, particularly an executive office, that's, I think, seen through a different set of eyes. I think when a man seeks an office, it's seen as virtuous, and ambition is healthy. The advice as a man, as a young man, so I know only as much as I know, but I've run some campaigns, so let me qualify it that way. The advice that I would give, as much as it's worth, would be, one, just run. Because it's not going to get better until we have more women running for office and until half of our government, half of our representatives or more are women. So that's one. Two, unfortunately, as I said, I think when women are judged differently, and one of the things that we found that was effective for Hillary is to talk about what she'll do in service of other people. Because the gender stereotypes that we're hardwired with are that men are supposed to lead and women are supposed to take care of the community. And so if you can communicate within those terms, you're probably going to be heard better. I'm not saying that's fair, just to be clear, but I've seen that work better and prevent people from letting gender stereotypes get in their way of really listening to what those candidates have to say and judging them fairly.
Perfect. Just in front of me, the guy in the glasses.
I sense you might have already answered this question, but what comes after identity politics?
What comes before it? I'm not sure. I don't know if I understand the question. If you could
I
elaborate
guess, given that many would argue that today we live in an era, or at least in America,
more.
as an era of identity politics,
Yeah.
I was wondering what kind of thing, be it to do with getting an economic agenda or pivoting to
I
more
understand.
ecological stance, what
Okay.
could follow identity politics?
I gotcha. I think what Democrats need to be on the lookout for as we move into the presidential election is that Donald Trump is going to do everything he can to prove to a set of voters that Democrats are focused on other people. And so, look, I believe that, you know, when certain people in our country are more likely to be shot by the police, when certain people are just, you know, when you equalize everything else, are just less likely to earn the right amount of money or get where they need to go in life, that's just wrong. So I'm going to speak for myself, I'm never going to abandon fairness. But Donald Trump wants us to talk about those things in a way that seem focused narrowly on a certain group of people for the purpose of dividing. And the challenge for us to overcome, and I think it's largely just not responding to everything all the time, is to balance speaking out against, speaking out when he does something that needs to be spoken out against, and telling our own story. And I think, and to your point, what I talked about earlier, I think was an example of where we let him decide basically everything that was being talked about and couldn't find a way or decided not to be assertive enough to tell our own story. I think that comes down to not responding. On a really tactical level, I'm very worried that Trump will live tweet during the debates and that the moderator of those debates will find it hard not to just introduce that content in. And it's so easy to drop that question about jobs. It's so easy to drop that question about healthcare and talk about what racial slur Trump is using or sexist slur Trump is using against a candidate on that stage. And it's going to be really hard. And I think he'll target the women candidates the most. And I will do everything I can to help, but clearly I wasn't able to figure it out. It's really tough.
Perfect. Since we started about 5 or 6 minutes past the hour, we're going to carry on for about that amount of time now. So we'll try and get as many questions as we can. Right, I'm going to take one at the back there. Yeah, you.
Hi there. Given this is Cambridge, I felt like a question needed to be asked about this. But back in 2016, did you know about Cambridge Analytica? And if you did, what did you think the impact would have been?
Yeah, I think I'll try to be quick on this because maybe we'll get one more.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll go really quick on this. There was so much we weren't aware of. We felt tremendous hostility on the internet. We thought that was organic. We knew that Cambridge Analytica was a company that Ted Cruz's campaign had used and then Donald Trump's was using. But the idea that they had all that Facebook data, I had obviously no idea. What makes me angry about that and what I think is troubling about it is that data gave a strategic advantage to the Trump campaign, and we asked for the same thing, right? We asked to be able to do what we asked for access to that data too. We'd be idiots if we hadn't, and we were told no when we followed the rules. Also, we couldn't get it, like they locked it off to us. So I think that's what I think Facebook needs to think about is like securities, they sort of frame it as like, oh, it's a mistake, but it's like you need to think about from a security standpoint, are you inadvertently giving away strategic advantages to one side? So
Perfect. We might even get two more questions.
two more.
In.
I'll be super short on those.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have the second question from the furthest person away. So that will give us time to get that round that way. And then one more from the furthest person away on that side as well. So we'll start back there.
I just wanted to ask how you would recommend people generally, the public, read the news. As someone who's been a part of controlling a narrative, but also having seen how the news perhaps has become more partisan or editorialized, how would you recommend we read it?
Well, I think there are definitely news sources, and I'm sure everybody here knows what they are, that are just more factually accurate and of better quality. I don't know, I feel biased and self-conscious because when you're a campaign operative, it's like every day your stuff's being mischaracterized or you feel that way. And I don't know what to tell you to do about that. Like, come to a forum 2 years later after they've run the campaign and ask what really happened. I also think it's just reading as many as you can from a depth standpoint, not a variety, there's too much news, but if you pick a few things and really read and try to learn. And then, look, I think campaigns need to do a better job talking directly to people. I would do that in a whole new way if I was running a campaign again. So maybe try to go right to the source, but and I won't get into like selecting certain news sources, but some, because then Breitbart will like call it a conspiracy, but you guys know what the good news sources are.
And for our final question, hopefully the microphone, perfect.
Obviously, the Electoral College affected the Democratic campaign last time round. How would you say you would approach that in the future? Just give us a bit of an example of what you do.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we just didn't get the votes. You know what I mean? In fact, from an Electoral College standpoint, sometimes people go to me and say, "Why did you go to Arizona?" And I actually think the criticism should have been, "Why did you go to Ohio and not spend more time in Arizona?" Right? We lost that by less than Ohio. The fact of the matter is you have to win. There's a lot of different ways to get there. Some of them involve North Carolina, but for us, it's really Florida and Pennsylvania. You gotta get one of those. And we spent more money in Florida than any other state, and we spent more money per capita in Pennsylvania than any other state. So we just lost. But I do think that if I were running a 2020 campaign, I would really do a deep dive on the Electoral College map because it is changing a little bit. States like Texas are so expensive, you really have to justify before going in somewhere like that. But Arizona is, I hate to talk about it this way, this is one of the reasons we need to get money out of politics. Arizona is a more affordable option. Georgia, if it gets close enough, is expensive, but more affordable than Texas. So, yeah. Should we do one more?
Yeah, go on.
One more.
And
I just feel so bad. We got all these.
I'm
I'm a bleeding heart liberal.
going to have to leave it out of
Yeah,
my
then
hands.
that.
So Rob, you
Oh, no.
you now have the authority to pick the person.
I'm going to pick her. You. I don't know, sorry. Oh, fabulous. In what state?
I was at headquarters. I'm from Brooklyn, but I just
Oh, I'm
moved
sorry, I
here.
didn't recognize you. Oh, this is not rigged, I promise. Where did you work?
I was in the volunteer area.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah,
In the
so-
room?
Yeah.
Oh, I loved it there.
Yes.
That's awesome.
No, it was lovely.
They did a great job. These guys had this room in Brooklyn. It was really important to me and to Hillary that we had a volunteer center in our headquarters, national headquarters. This place, correct me if I'm wrong, this place was like burning it up every day. We had people, so many people in there, and they all signed the wall. And it was one of the saddest things at the end of the campaign when they painted over all those names and all that.
Oh, not there forever. Not there
Yeah,
still.
yeah. Anyway, sorry, go ahead. You did a
No,
great
it's-
job. Thank you.
Thank you. No, I was interested in your point about Beto O'Rourke and wanting somebody who's a good leader and a good communicator. But I think you could also argue with the rise of personality politics, that's what we have with Donald Trump. And do you
Right.
think that the breakdown of the party system, or if you think the party system has broken down to a certain point, has given rise to this? And do you think that the party can ever reclaim some of the power that right now is driven all by personality and sort of media?
It's a great question. I think the power of a campaign is in its ability to mobilize people and money. And I think today, the most effective way to mobilize people and money is to get people sharing your message and appealing to each other. So when I worked on Howard Dean's campaign, this was happening on Meetup and email, right? For the first time, you could just send out an email to all your friends and say, hey, here's a thermometer I set up on the internet. And if you give, that thermometer is going to go up and we're going to meet a goal. Like, that stuff was so powerful, right? We're seeing some of the downsides of the power of social media. But it's all about people sharing and liking and building a base of fans. That's where you're going to get your people and your money. And so, unfortunately, yes, Donald Trump succeeded at that. We can succeed too, obviously, and we have plenty of people who can. And while money continues to be such an important part of our political process, you got to mobilize that way. It's interesting when you ask about the party. I don't know that the party, like, what's the party? You know what I mean? What really is it? I was saying to a group earlier today, people think there's like the room where it happens at the DNC. There's no room where it happens. Like, and I'm sorry if that bursts anybody's bubble. It doesn't exist. It doesn't. The Democratic nominee is chosen by voters. The votes go towards delegates which choose the nominee, and it's like, one of the beautiful parts about the Democratic Party, it's the same rules across the country, everywhere. You can go look at them online. Even the superdelegates, I think, were a red herring. I'm glad we got rid of them, because we just didn't need them, and it was crazy. It was crazy that the idea that they'd ever take away the nominee from the popular vote. And that's never happened, by the way. Arguably, the closest we ever got to that was Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, by the way. Hillary Clinton won the popular vote in the 2008 primary. Most people don't know that. Imagine if Bernie Sanders had won the popular vote. I mean, just think about that. So I don't think the party, yes, the sort of local machine politics is not what it used to be. I think we are where we are. And I think particularly as long as money is so critical to a functioning, particularly presidential campaign, you're gonna win and lose that fan race on social media. Yeah.
Well, with that fortuitous meeting of minds there.
Thank you again.
We are sadly having to come to a close tonight. Just a few points from me before we head off. First of all, thank you to all the stewards, so Tudor, Luke, Liam, Abdullah, Adam up there doing the AV. If you want to be name-checked next time, you can sign up to be a steward. It's brilliant. You get a free panino. Note the use of the singular. You also get a £5 bar tab, which is almost as good as the panino. And you also get a chance to meet speakers like Robby. There's also opportunities to meet the speakers. So in every single one of our Facebook events from now on, if there's time, There'll be a chance and a link to sign up to if you remember to meet our speakers beforehand, which is a really good opportunity to get those questions asked beforehand. And if you've got any questions about that, genuinely come and talk to us after this event. So anyone who's in high vis, so I'm going to ask some of the committee members to put on high vis, and they'll be around out there. If you have any questions about who we are, what we do, I know it's still open period, so do go out there and ask those people. They're committee members, they know what's going on, and if you have any questions, ask them. Final thing, actually penultimate thing, events coming up. So the ball, the Freshers' Ball, the ballot for that, so I know there might be a bit of confusion about that. If you sign up to be a new member by the 4th of October, at midnight, so that's tomorrow at midnight, not tonight at midnight, you'll be sent through a link on Friday allowing you to sign up for the ball. So that'll be emailed through to you, and the results for that will be allocated over the weekend. We have Adam Driver on Saturday, 11 o'clock. That's only for members. We also have the debate tomorrow night on no confidence in Her Majesty's government, with 5 MPs coming to thresh it out. The final thing I have to do is to thank Robby for coming up and speaking. So, well, and if you could keep the round of applause going as we head out.
Thank you.
Cheers. Thanks so much. That's brilliant.
Thank you.